Hey folks, thanks for watching my monologues. In case you haven't heard, I'm told there's an election coming up pretty soon. In some areas, there's a lot of violence and civil unrest. If you're in the market for personal protection for yourself or your family, I'd encourage you to visit Guns Etc. Guns Etc. is 10,200 square feet and they have product. And they're getting new product all the time. They'll work with you to get the exact type of protection that fits your needs. Stop by their store in Mesa or visit gunsetcetera.com where you'll have access to over $400 million worth of firearms and accessories. And if you like my monologues, please subscribe to 960 The Patriots YouTube channel. Welcome back and happy October 12th, 2020. How can you think that? A question, no doubt, many of you receive from friends, colleagues, strangers at parties, and family members when you answer Trump to the question, who are you voting for? It's the same response or question you get when you are asked, who do you think will win? How can you think that? You know, for months I've said I believed Donald Trump will win, and not by a little. Somewhere in the ether, backstopped by the response to the debate, by his illness, it has become super conventional wisdom that Donald Trump is not possibly poised to win the election. And doesn't every poll back that up? I'm not convinced, and so I'm not wavering. I cannot tell you what pollsters do or how they do them. I cannot say whether they've adjusted their models appropriately since 2016, nor can I say that whatever one thought of Donald Trump's debate performance, it was not so much different than everything else Donald Trump has done since becoming president. Flying right into the Death Star of the left-wing media, the Democratic Party, and their axis. And without apology or standard mannerisms. What I can tell you is there are some pollsters who don't believe the other pollsters. Take John Zogby, a Democrat. He thinks it's actually a two-point race right now. His son, who works with him, says here's why. Quote, if you live in an area and you live in an echo chamber and most of your friends think a certain way, a lot of times the echo chamber effect is that you tend to project. How could people think such a certain way? Clearly, for example, the president is out of mind and he's bad for this country, he's bad for the world, so of course people are going to turn out in droves for Biden. I'm afraid that's what's happening, a projection of bias in the data, he said. I know of 3 other surveys the mainstream media completely ignores. According to a Cato study, 77% of conservatives are afraid to discuss their political positions or preferences. That's more than 25% greater than the percentage of liberals who are afraid to say what they believe. Scott Rasmussen released a study last month revealing 17% of likely voters who strongly approve of Trump but are less likely to let others know how they intend to vote in the upcoming election. And yet another survey by Cloud Research, a marketing firm, found that 11.7% of Republicans and 10.5% of independents said they wouldn't share their true opinion. Now ask yourself, if you are an independent, why would you conceal your opinion? It's not bloody likely you'd be shy about supporting the Democrats given the whole culture, which tells you that's the conventional, normal, never mind right thing to do. That's 4 pretty respectable institutions: Zogby, Rasmussen, Cato, Cloud Research. Now I ask you to consult your own experience. You ever been polled or taken a call from a pollster? I haven't. That's my first point. Don't let the polls get you down. I don't think they're representative. Second reason I'm not letting up on my opinion. Do you think the country has changed so much from 2016 that was willing to give Donald Trump a chance and seeing his follow-through and accomplishments that it's willing to say, never mind? Tax cuts, roaring economy up until the beginning of this year, Middle East peace, confronting China, immigration reform, a conservative or originalist judiciary. Did he let voters down on those issues, breaking promises, or rather did he exceed expectations? If he had broken his promises, I could understand, but he didn't. He fulfilled them, and then some. How do you lose voters who you impressed, especially voters that were originally tepid? Third reason. The media is clearly frustrated by their lack of power. You can see it when they wring their hands and express their mortification, as Ted Koppel did on CBS Sunday Morning last week, or as the New York Times did just this last Friday, over their loss of audience, especially to conservative bloggers, podcasts, and talk radio. Despite getting the audience wrong over and over again, in their long piece in the New York Times on talk radio last Friday, the headline was, quote, "Talk radio is turning millions of Americans into conservatives," close quote. Candace Owens, in her new book, Blackout, puts it this way. CNN can reach 760,000 viewers at the top of its reach. I can reach 2.5 million with a single tweet, and I'm hardly alone. Fourth reason, they lie. If Joe Biden and the media had the goods, why would they repeat lies over and over again about Donald Trump, about one of our most delicate of national issues that has never before been as exploited as it is now, short of how, say, maybe George Wallace used to campaign, except in reverse. The use and abuse of race is gutter politics and only goes to the gutter. Nostalgia de la boue, one might say, out of desperation. The left used to accuse us of doing that with dog whistles. It was never quite true, but they knew the point. Race is what the desperate will use. Fifth reason. Did you watch the Amy Barrett hearings this morning? There was one big tell. The opening statements by the Democrats were not about the Supreme Court and judicial philosophy or the Constitution. They were about politics and policy, slamming Donald Trump for a whole variety of policies they disagreed with, especially on health care. They used the opportunity for politics on public policy because they saw the opportunity not to speak of Lady Justice being blind and judicial philosophy. They saw it as one long microphone grab at a political rally. Go back and watch how much there was said about justice, the Constitution, you name it. And how much was a series of screeds about Donald Trump and posturing about what judges and justices should not be about, dressing up defenses of Democratic Party legislation. As Ben Sass put it, he didn't understand what an eighth grader would think watching the hearings. It was the stuff of the Health and Finance Committees of the Senate, not the Judiciary Committee. There is a dramatic irony to it all, and it will be fully ignored by the New York Times. While the Democrats have been campaigning against Amy Barrett for being too political, all they did at the hearing this morning was raise political issues. They have little to do, nothing frankly, to do with Article 3, whose judges are to take public policy preferences as irrelevant, truly irrelevant, and yet the Democrats made them prime this morning. As John Marshall put it, it is a constitution we are expanding. Excuse me. It is a constitution we are expounding, not the merits and demerits of the Affordable Health Care Act. Of course, that was all part and parcel of a double tell. The Democrats have always wanted the judiciary to serve as a super legislature, to do the work that the American people would never go for as a matter of voting and legislation. Why do you think they did what they did to Brett Kavanaugh? Also, check the mood. Always check the mood. Who seemed unhappy and angry on the committee today, and who seemed optimistic and relatively cheerful? Usually, the winning are not the dour and the angry, or the liars. If you have the victory, you don't need to make up or invent scurrilous lies about your opponents. Sixth reason, America. Perhaps I should say Americans. It is reported that Richard Nixon, in his last days in the White House and speaking in Vino Veritas to the official portrait of his nemesis John Kennedy, it is reported that he said, "People see you and see who they want to be. They see me and see who they really are." This from the man who won the presidency in 1968, the year of the left dominating everything. This from the man who won 49 states 4 years later. This from the man most think actually won the literal election of 1960 against the ghost he was speaking to. The glamour may not be what you want. The decorum may not be what you want. But the reason glamour is because it's not common. It's unusual. Donald Trump's language is perhaps not exactly everybody's ideal, but that's the funny thing about ideals. People point to them as aspirational, not operational. I don't think Donald Trump's language or behavior is unrecognized by most American households or dinner tables. So when we or they are constantly told he is a scourge because of his language and behavior, caution, careful. It's the language and behavior most actually recognize and use. Democrats have never figured out that their contempt for the common is contempt felt by those who are common. Or perhaps a good way to put it, the average American. Odi profanum vulgus is how Horace put it. I hate the common crowd. We used to laugh at what William Buckley said so many times. A man at least as part of the elite culture as any Rockefeller. He said, I would rather be governed by the first 2,000 people in the telephone directory of Boston than by the Harvard University faculty. Or as G.K. Chesterton put it in his book on what he saw in America, quote, it is the experience of men that always returns to the equality of men. It is the average that ultimately justifies the average man, close quote. Don't underestimate or over-solicit the common touch or the appeal to common manners and common sense. Let me try it this way. Toss out all the hype and bootstrapped outrage. When the Klieg lights go off and the stacked audiences are not corralled, do you think Americans like policies that throw billions of dollars to terrorist regimes like Iran? There's a reason that deal was never ratified by the Senate, after all, isn't there? When the Klieg lights go off and the stacked audiences are not corralled, do you think Americans oppose the killing of master terrorists? When the Klieg lights go off and the stacked audiences are not corralled, do you think Americans want veterans and taxpayers standing in line with, or worse, behind the lines of those who come in illegally to take advantage of stretched thin health care and educational benefits? When the Klieg lights go off and the stacked audiences are not corralled, do you think Americans want a party that kowtows to socialists and Marxist movements and the violent in this country? When the Klieg lights go off and the stacked audiences are not corralled, do you think Americans like being told they are all racists and bigots? End of day. This is a country much more like the denizens of Commonwealth Avenue in Boston than it is the sociology department of Cambridge. This is a country that still reveres its founding and those men etched into Mount Rushmore. And really, almost all the men whose statues, whether they be Abraham Lincoln or Frederick Douglass or Thomas Jefferson or even Jesus Christ, all these statues that have been destroyed by the movement the Democrats embrace and that the Republican incumbent president opposes, who do Americans really stand with? Those statues staying erect or the movements that try to destroy them? In sum, stay strong. Stay optimistic. It's an odd thing, the oddest, when our culture or high culture embarrasses and shames those who believe those things into silence, or tries to. But the normal and average American need not blush and knows they need not. They just need to wait a little longer, say 22 days longer. We are a patient people, after all. It is the revolutionary who is impatient. And to borrow from a common radio broadcaster from Middle America, after all, we're Americans, aren't we? I'm Seth Leibson. We'll be right back.